All right, get ready, because today we're going deep on The Art of War by Sun
Oh,
Tzu.
exciting.
We're going to look at the actual text itself and historical accounts of how it's been used and maybe misused, plus some modern analysis.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. It's a 2,500-year-old book on warfare,
Yeah.
and it's still studied by everyone from, generals to CEOs.
It's really is remarkable. I mean, the art of war, it speaks to something pretty fundamental about strategy and conflict. I think something that kind of transcends the battlefield and applies to, all sorts of competitive situations.
Absolutely. That's what we're here to explore. Why is this ancient text
Oh.
still so relevant today? Now, before we get into all the strategies and the nitty-gritty, we've got to address the elephant in the room. Was Sun Tzu even a real person?
Ah, the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a real debate among historians about whether Sun Tzu was an actual, historical figure or more of a legend.
Okay, so what's the evidence on each side?
Well, on the one hand, you've got folks who believe that Sun Tzu was a flesh and blood general, and they point to records like the Qi,
Yeah.
which was written a couple of centuries after the Art of War, and it describes his service to the King of Wu, and actually credits him with some pretty impressive victories.
So there's at least some historical documentation to support his existence. What about the skeptics? What are their arguments?
Yeah, well, they raise some good points. One thing is that Sun Tzu is conspicuously absent from other important historical texts from that same period. So he's not mentioned in the Zhu's One, for example, which is a pretty detailed chronicle of that era.
So it's kind of suspicious that he would be left out of such a comprehensive record.
Exactly. And some scholars even argue that the writing style and the kind of warfare that's described in The Art of War might actually point to a later date of composition.
Oh, interesting. It's like a historical detective story. Do you have a personal opinion on this whole Sun Tzu mystery?
It's one of those historical puzzles that we may never fully solve. But honestly, whether he was a real person or kind of a composite figure, representing the strategic wisdom of his time, I think the brilliance of The Art of War, it remains undeniable.
I love that perspective. It's like, who cares who wrote it? The advice is rock solid. Speaking of advice, let's talk about one of the most famous anecdotes from The Art of War, the story of Sun Tzu training the King of Wu's concubines.
Ah, yes. Yeah, this story really encapsulates Sun Tzu's approach to strategy.
Oh.
And yeah, it's a power move on multiple levels.
I can only imagine the scene. So for those who haven't heard the story, what exactly went down?
Well, the king, may be a little skeptical of this guy claiming to be a master strategist, throws down a challenge, asks Sun Tzu to train his concubines, his ladies of the court, into a disciplined fighting force. He was thinking, this is impossible, and it's going to be a good way to expose Sun Tzu as a fraud.
So Sun Tzu takes on the challenge. What happens next?
Well, Sun Tzu, totally unfazed, divides the women into companies, just like he would with soldiers, gives them clear commands, and starts drilling them. And here's where it gets interesting. The women, used to a life of, shall we say, leisure, don't really take him seriously at first. They giggle, they kind of mess around.
I bet the king was loving this, seeing his strategist getting shown up by a bunch of giggling concubines.
Oh, I'm sure he was feeling pretty smug. But then Sun Tzu does something that makes everyone snap to attention. He enforces his commands ruthlessly. When two of the king's favorites continue to disobey, he has them beheaded right there on the spot.
Whoa, that escalated quickly. I imagine there was no more giggling after that.
You got it. The point was made loud and clear. Discipline is paramount, no matter who you're dealing with.
I bet the king was suddenly sweating a little bit.
I'm sure he was having second thoughts about his little test. But it's a brilliant illustration of a couple of Sun Tzu's core principles. First, the absolute necessity of clear communication and strict obedience if you want to achieve any kind of, organized objective. And second, Sun Tzu's unwavering focus on results.
He was clearly not messing around. It's almost like this whole demonstration with the concubines was a microcosm of his larger philosophy on warfare and strategy.
Precisely. And that actually leads us to his 5 constant factors that need to be considered in any strategic situation.
Okay.
Moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline.
Okay, I remember reading about these, and to be honest, I found them a little cryptic at first. What do these constant factors actually mean in a a practical sense.
Right, they do need some unpacking. So let's start with moral law. Sun Tzu's emphasizing the importance of a shared sense of purpose and unity between a leader and their people. He's saying, you need everyone on board, aligned with the mission, otherwise your efforts will be, scattered and ineffective.
So it's not just about having a strong leader. It's about having a leader who can inspire and motivate their followers towards a common goal. It makes me think of those companies where everyone's truly passionate about what they do and how that can translate to, success.
Exactly. Then we have heaven, which might sound a little out there, but it basically means understanding and adapting to the forces that are outside of your control. Things like the weather, the time of day, even luck.
It's like recognizing that you can't control everything, but you can control how you respond to the circumstances you're dealt.
Right. And Earth, the next factor, is all about understanding the terrain, the literal battlefield, and using it to your advantage. Sun Tzu talks about, high ground, choke points, natural barriers, all the elements of the physical environment that can be used strategically.
So it's about knowing your environment inside and out and using it to your advantage. Kind of like a home field advantage in sports, but on a much grander scale.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the commander. Sun Tzu lays out some pretty specific qualities that he believes a good leader should possess: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness.
It's interesting how he combines those softer qualities like benevolence with the strictness that we saw on display with the concubines. It's like he's saying you can be compassionate, but you also have to be firm and decisive.
Absolutely. You need that balance to earn respect and get things done. And finally, we have method and discipline, which covers the more, logistical, organizational aspects of any endeavor.
Okay, break that down for me. What exactly falls under method and discipline?
So let's just talk about, clear chains of command, efficient use of resources, and yes, controlled spending. He's emphasizing the importance of having systems in place to keep everything running smoothly.
It's like having a well-oiled machine, every part working together in sync.
Precisely. Oh. And while he was specifically talking about armies, you can see how these 5 constant factors apply to so many other areas of life.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting for our listener. We want you to think about your own goals, your own battlefields. Are you considering all of these constant factors in your approach? Do you have the right moral law driving your team? Are you adapting to the heaven of your circumstances?
A powerful framework for analyzing any situation where you're, trying to achieve a goal, whether it's leading a team, starting a business, or even just tackling a personal challenge.
All right, now let's dive into one of Sun Tzu's most controversial but undeniably fascinating principles: deception. He famously states, all warfare is based on deception.
It's a pretty bold statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
It's certainly provocative, but it's important to understand what Sun Tzu means by deception. He's not advocating for, lying or cheating. He's talking about using strategy and cunning to outmaneuver your opponent.
So it's more about being strategic with information, knowing when to reveal and when to conceal. It's about creating a sense of surprise and keeping your opponent guessing. Exactly. He gives some really vivid examples in the text, like appearing weak when you're strong, setting traps, and attacking where your enemy least expects it.
It all sounds very cloak and dagger. But how does this translate to the real world outside of a literal battlefield? Most of us aren't out there setting booby traps for our competitors.
Well, hopefully not. But think about it this way. In any competitive environment, whether it's, business, politics, or even personal relationships, there's a strategic element to how you present yourself and the information you share.
So it's about being thoughtful and strategic. About what you reveal and when you reveal it. It's like playing poker, knowing when to hold your cards close to your chest and when to go all in.
Exactly. It's about controlling the narrative and influencing your opponent's perceptions.
It's making me rethink a few things, that's for sure. It's like Sun Tzu is saying, always be one step ahead. Always be thinking about how you can use information to your advantage. Now, another principle that jumped out at me was Sun Tzu's emphasis on speed and efficiency. He makes it very clear that prolonged conflicts are a recipe for disaster.
Right. He points out that long wars drain your resources, exhaust your troops, and sap morale. He has this great line, thus Though we have heard of stupid haste in war, cleverness has never been seen associated with long delays.
That's a brilliant quote. It's so applicable to our fast-paced world, whether it's launching a product or making a personal decision. Sun Tzu's reminding us to act strategically,
Yeah.
but not to get bogged down in endless planning.
It's about finding that sweet spot between thoughtful preparation and decisive action.
Okay, speaking of action, Sun Tzu had a lot to say about terrain and adapting your strategy based on the environment. He actually breaks down 6 different types of terrain, from accessible ground to desperate ground.
Yeah, he was fascinated by how the environment could be used strategically to gain an advantage. I mean, think about historical examples like Hannibal crossing the Alps with war elephants. It's a classic example of using the terrain to surprise and outmaneuver your opponent.
That's incredible. It's like turning the environment itself into a weapon.
Exactly. And Sun Tzu is challenging us to think about our own terrain, the context we're operating in, and how we can use it to our advantage. What are the opportunities and challenges presented by our unique circumstances?
It's like he's saying, don't just accept the battlefield as it is. Think about how you can shape it to work for you. Now, last but not least, we have to talk about Sun Tzu's fascination with espionage.
Ah, yes. Espionage was like his secret weapon. He outlines 5 classes of spies: local spies, inward spies, converted spies, doomed spies, and surviving spies. Each plays a specific role in gathering information and deceiving the enemy.
It's all very James Bond, isn't it? All these different types of spies infiltrating the enemy's ranks,
Exactly.
gathering intel. Do you have a favorite spy story?
The one that always comes to mind is the story of Pan Chao, a Chinese general who used doomed spies to mislead the enemy and achieve a brilliant victory. He basically fed them false information, knowing that they'd be captured and spill the beans, leading his opponent right into a trap.
Wow, that's some next-level spycraft. And it's not just ancient history, is it? I mean, think about how businesses and governments still use intelligence gathering to gain an edge today.
Absolutely. The methods may have evolved, but the principle remains the same. Information is power, especially when you know something your opponent doesn't.
It's amazing how relevant these ancient strategies still are in our modern world. Sun Tzu was clearly a master of understanding not only the physical aspects of conflict, but also the psychological ones.
Absolutely. He knew that battles are won and lost, not just on the battlefield, but also in the minds of the opponents.
So how does Sun Tzu approach the psychological aspects of warfare? Give me some insights into his thinking.
Well, he talks a lot about the importance of morale and discipline, both for your own troops and for your enemies. Remember that story about training the concubines? That was a psychological tower play as much as it was a demonstration of military discipline.
Well, he wasn't just trying to teach those women how to fight. He was sending a message about his own ruthlessness and the absolute importance of obeying his commands. It makes you think about how leaders in any field can use similar tactics to establish authority and command respect.
Exactly. And this understanding of psychology, it informs all of Sun Tzu's strategic advice. For example, he advises against attacking an enemy whose troops are all fired up and eager for battle.
Really? That seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't that be the best time to catch them off guard when they're all riled up and maybe not thinking strategically?
You might think so. Yeah. But Sun Tzu argues that their initial enthusiasm, it's actually going to give them an edge. It's better to wait, he says, until their energy wanes, their morale dips, and then strike when they're more vulnerable.
So it's about exploiting those moments of weakness. It's like waiting for your opponent to punch themselves out before you deliver the knockout blow.
Precisely. He also cautions against pursuing an enemy that's feigning retreat. Could easily be a trap designed to lure you into a vulnerable position.
So it's like he's constantly reminding us to be wary of appearances. Things aren't always what they seem. Have you ever been in a situation where you misread someone's intentions or fell for a deceptive tactic?
Oh, absolutely. It happens to all of us. But Sun Tzu is teaching us to look deeper, to question our assumptions, and to be aware of the motivations that are driving the actions of others.
It's almost like he's encouraging us to develop a healthy dose of skepticism, always looking for hidden agendas and questioning what we see on the surface.
Well, maybe not paranoia, but definitely a discerning eye. He wants us to cultivate a keen sense of awareness, to constantly assess the situation and adapt our strategies accordingly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about deception, speed, the importance of adapting to the terrain, and intelligence gathering. Are there any other key principles from the art of war that we should explore?
One that I think is particularly relevant to our deep dive here is Sun Tzu's emphasis on knowing yourself as well as you know your enemy.
Ah, that's a good one. It's easy to get so caught up in analyzing your opponent that you forget to take stock of your own strengths and
He
weaknesses.
dedicates an entire chapter to this idea, arguing that understanding your own capabilities and limitations is crucial for making sound decisions.
So it's not just about sizing up your opponent. It's about having an honest assessment of your own resources, skills, and maybe even more importantly, your weaknesses. It's about knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at.
Exactly. This self-awareness allows you to leverage your strengths but just as importantly, minimize your weaknesses.
I think this is something that that we can all relate to, right? Have you ever taken on a project or a challenge that turned out to be a little outside of your comfort zone?
Oh, for sure. And sometimes it works out great. But other times you realize that you might have overestimated your abilities,
Uh-huh.
underestimated the challenges involved.
It's a powerful reminder that strategy is as much about internal assessment as it is about external analysis.
Absolutely. And this leads us to another crucial point, Sun Tzu's emphasis on planning and preparation. He believed that victory is often determined before the battle even begins.
I can see how that ties into knowing yourself and your enemy. You need that foundational knowledge to even begin to create a solid plan.
Precisely. Sun Tzu argues that meticulous planning, careful consideration of all factors, and anticipating potential challenges are essential for success.
So it's about being proactive rather than reactive, thinking several steps ahead and anticipating your opponent's moves, but also being prepared for unexpected twists and turns.
Exactly. He advocates for thinking through various scenarios, having backup plans, and being prepared to adapt your strategy as the situation unfolds.
It's interesting how this idea of planning translates so well to so many different areas of life, whether you're developing a business strategy or just planning a vacation. Having a well-thought-out plan can make all the difference.
That's the beauty of the art of war. It's a blueprint for approaching any challenge with a strategic mindset.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about Sun Tzu's views on deception, speed, adapting to the terrain, intelligence gathering, self-awareness, and the importance of planning. It's incredible how much wisdom is packed into this ancient text.
And we haven't even touched on his thoughts on leadership, logistics, and the use of different types of weapons. There's so much to unpack here.
It really makes you wonder how a book written for ancient warfare can still feel so relevant today. I mean, the world has changed so much in the last 2,500 years.
That's because Sun Tzu, he tapped into some fundamental truths about human nature, conflict, and strategy. These are timeless principles that transcend specific time periods and cultures.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more fascinating aspect of The Art of War. It's something that might surprise people who haven't actually read the book. Sun Tzu actually devotes a lot of attention to the moral dimensions of conflict.
Ah, yes. That's such an important part of Sun Tzu's philosophy, and it often gets overlooked.
It's easy to assume that a book about warfare would be all about, brutality and winning at any cost. But Sun Tzu seems to have a more nuanced perspective.
He does. He emphasizes the importance of minimizing casualties, avoiding unnecessary destruction, and even treating your enemies with a degree of respect.
Wait, really? Why would he advocate for showing respect to your enemies? Wouldn't that make you appear weak?
Not necessarily. Sun Tzu believed that treating captured soldiers humanely and avoiding excessive violence could actually work to your advantage. It could demoralize the enemy's remaining troops and encourage them to surrender.
It's like a psychological tactic in itself, undermining their will to fight by showing them compassion.
Exactly. And he also believed that minimizing destruction could benefit the victor in the long run. After all, if you're conquering a territory, you want its infrastructure and resources to remain intact.
That's a very pragmatic perspective. It's like he's saying, don't just think about winning the battle. Think about what happens after the battle is over. Think about the long-term consequences of your actions.
Absolutely. And this leads us to one of Sun Tzu's most profound and challenging statements. He says, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting."
Wow. That's a powerful statement. What do you think he means by that?
He's suggesting that true victory is achieved not through brute force, but through strategic maneuvering, diplomacy, and psychological influence. It's about outsmarting your opponent, not just overpowering them.
So it's about finding ways to achieve your objectives with minimal bloodshed and destruction.
Precisely. And this idea is incredibly relevant to our modern world, where conflicts often have complex political and social dimensions.
It's a reminder that there are often alternative paths to resolution.
Yeah.
And that resorting to violence, whether it's, physical violence or some other form of aggression, should always be a last resort.
And it also highlights the importance of strategic thinking in all aspects of conflict, not just the physical confrontation itself.
It's fascinating how Sun Tzu's ideas about war can be applied to so many different areas of life. It's like he's giving us a framework for navigating any kind of challenge with wisdom and foresight.
That's the enduring legacy of The Art of War. It's a timeless guide to understanding strategy, conflict, and human nature.
It definitely made me rethink my own approach to challenging situations. And I bet our listeners feeling the same way. It really is a testament to the enduring power of Sun Tzu's insights. We've talked a lot about the strategies and principles in The Art of War, but I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the debate about Sun Tzu's actual existence. Do you think it ultimately matters whether he was a real person or more of a mythical figure?
Yeah, that's a question that has fascinated scholars for centuries. And I think the answer is both yes and no. On the one hand, knowing more about the historical context, the author's personal experiences, and the specific conflicts that shape the art of war could definitely enrich our understanding of the text.
It's like having that extra layer of background information, knowing where these ideas came from and what real-life events might have inspired them.
Exactly. But on the other hand, even if Sun Tzu turns out to be more of a legend, a kind of composite figure embodying the strategic wisdom of his time, that doesn't diminish the power and relevance of the ideas presented in The Art of War.
It's like those ancient myths and fables. Even if they're not literally true, they can still convey profound truths about human nature and the world.
Precisely. And in a way, The Art of War has taken on a mythical quality itself. It's become this timeless guide to strategy, studied and revered by leaders in all sorts of fields, regardless of its precise origins.
So it's almost like the mystery surrounding Sun Tzu adds to the allure of the book.
I think it does, and it speaks to the universality of the principles he outlines. They resonate with people across cultures and time periods because they tap into something fundamental about human behavior and the nature of conflict.
It's incredible how a text that's thousands of years old can still feel so fresh and relevant today. I mean, have you ever come across a passage in The Art of War that felt particularly striking or insightful, maybe even surprising given its age?
There's a passage that I find myself coming back to again and again. It's where Sun Tzu talks about the importance of choosing your battles carefully. He says, he will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. It's such a simple idea, but so profound.
It's like he's reminding us that not every conflict requires a full-on confrontation. Sometimes the most strategic move is to walk away or to find a more diplomatic solution.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that true strength lies in knowing when to exert your power and when to exercise restraint. Sun Tzu is all about picking your battles carefully, focusing your energy on the conflicts that truly matter.
That's such a valuable lesson, especially in our modern world where we're constantly bombarded with information and demands on our attention. It's like he's giving us permission to say no, to step back from the fray, and to conserve our energy for the challenges that truly deserve our focus.
It's about being strategic with your time and energy, not letting yourself get pulled into every little skirmish. Sun Tzu would definitely be an advocate for prioritizing and finding that balance between engagement and disengagement.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive into The Art of War, what's the one key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with? What's the most important thing for them to remember about Sun Tzu's teachings?
I think the most profound lesson Sun Tzu offers is this. True victory is not just about winning battles. It's about achieving your objectives in the most strategic and efficient way possible, while minimizing unnecessary harm and destruction. It's about being thoughtful, adaptable, and always seeking to understand both your opponent and yourself.
That's a brilliant summation. It's a reminder that the art of war is not just a manual for warfare. It's a guide to navigating life's complex challenges with wisdom, foresight, and a deep understanding of human nature. So for our listener out there, the next time you find yourself facing a difficult situation, think of Sun Tzu and remember his timeless advice.
You might just find that those ancient strategies give you the edge you need to achieve your goals.
And with that, we'll bring this deep dive to a close. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the strategic brilliance of the art of war with us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a new and fascinating topic.